Morning, good morning. It is super blue dark early. Nonetheless, Monday, March 23rd. Up very early this morning as I like to frequent. This is the intro to the query I'll be doing regarding hip hop. And like I said, this is a soft introduction before I head to the gym for the day and get everything revved up. I think for the longest time, me and my friend had a joke. When we were in middle school, we would purposefully trigger another one of my friends because he was so sensitive to hip hop. Meaning that reflex to debate or argue or defend or proclaim, etc. with hip hop, you know what I mean? Particularly talking your favorites, he would always jump in. So, for example, we would say stupid shit like we'd be like, Trillville is better than Tupac. Makes no sense. Can't compare them by any regards. But he would hear that and jump in and be like, how you gonna say Trillville better than Tupac? You know, and then we say something a little more reasonable, you know, the whole Biggie Pac thing, or we'd say, clearly he loved Tupac the best, right? Or we could say, doggone Bow Wow is better than Lil Wayne, right? We would just say things like that to get him out of his shell, and then we would, you know, it's kind of an inside joke. What does that have to do with hip hop? Well, there's always been a notion that, you know, they took it from us. They took our art. They monetized it. They did this to our art. And the question that I want to posit, and there's been tons of books on this, I'll list those in the next segment, but did they take it or did the plan just take off? It's a really important question to ask because if you spend your whole life saying that, and you could say, you know, certain racial groups, certain terms, but this external occupant, right? We grow up saying that a lot, and many of us never grow out of it. So again, did they take it or did the plan just take off? So what I'm trying to tell you, I don't like the phrase dumbing it down. I think it's insulting to both parties, but to simplify and streamline what I'm saying, if you want the clocks back to when hip hop started, the art form, you know, there was an aspect of originality. There was, you know, this kind of grassroots type of higher inner power healing our people, right? And it's like, man, when it comes to these programs and illusions and, you know, the knowledge, it seems like there's an endless series of like rabbit holes. You know, rabbit hole's kind of a new terminology, but it basically just means a zone of interest. You know, when you get into black consciousness, as it were, almost everything you hear is like, you know, you train yourself to receive that it's some lost part of you. And so every new thing you encounter, you don't question its validity. You're just like, oh, that's dope. You know, oh, I need to get some of that. Oh, I need to get some of that. Pretty soon, it's almost like detonating your own confusion because you're down with so much and you're so awake. But no. To those of you who kind of set your hip hop programming to the side, I want to commend you because it affected all of us. And hip hop in general affects all demographics of people, but for being honest, it has a much more pronounced stain on a certain group, and maybe that was planned. That's what I'm trying to say. It's this false ownership of art, I feel like people's ancestors, or even their, 2 generations back, I feel like when they made things, it wasn't because they owned it. It was because they could use it as a canvas to go forward and promote what they was doing. This whole, they took our art, that narrative is kind of a loop-de-loop back into victimhood, and it doesn't illustrate all the, shall we say, different types of hands that influence hip-hop. We look at it as this grand infiltration, and the so-called whites did this, and then before we knew it, they took our stuff. It was like this kind of like 2 kids on the sandbox, and one kid, goes to the bathroom, and then he comes back out, and it's not that cut and dry. Just like it's not as cut and dry when you think that almost every scenario in history that involves conquest is told very black and white, no pun intended. It's told very, you get the surface level story. Just trying to stay on topic. The European forces or what have you, they didn't just truck their way into Africa and body everybody and haul people through the jungle and fight off animals and diseases and heat and just got back on the ship and kept, no. In the grand construct of things, that would be what it appeared to have happened. But you had what? You had traders on the inside, you had guides, you had pretty much merchants, getting them bodies off the water by way of commerce. And that's just one example. Same with the indigenous America. They didn't just, storm through the East Coast and then body their way out west and then fight off bears and fight off wolves and do all this and that. It's not as simple as it seems. And it's tying it back to hip hop, it's almost a relief when you stop defending, with our stuff and they took our music and they took, once you ask yourself the question, okay, what if it was a plan? And it's that simple. You don't even have to map out all the distinct characteristics of the plan. It's just on a rudimentary, elementary level, what if it was always meant to go that way? Hell, you talk about rabbit holes. What does a rabbit do? All these little jokes, these little games, it's there's no coincidence somebody called it that. Very alchemical process when it comes to hip hop. And we're not even talking about the frequencies and the music and, the different subject matter and the, some people are even alluding to the fact nowadays that they're actually inserting darkness into certain frequencies, and it's changed the entire pulse of the people being the listeners, right? It's like a scar on their soul, but it's pleasurable, because it doesn't announce itself. It's just it's literally in the dynamics of the song, and people can't understand why. So, was it a plan? And if it was a plan, then after the work is done, is it to be disposed, or is it still something to linger on to and try to defend, and I always think back to, in this first segment, I always think back to, was it Chris Rock's Never Scared, 2002? And he was like, my favorite song right now is Impossible to Defend, and everybody's joking and laughing and stuff. And he was alluding to the crunk music era, Lil Jon and all that. It was a joke, but that's what I love about comedy. Comedy, you can put a ripple of truth out there and then just put all this stuff around it. And the people who get the intelligence ingrained in your joke, they'll understand the whole act. As opposed to just, I love comedy. It's so underrated when it comes to the art form and the timing and the inception of what it means to your audience. Love comedy for that. So, moving on towards part 2. But people who are still out there, I'm not talking about, I got a favorite rapper, I got a favorite, or like we told you in the beginning with my buddy, go up to him and say something crazy like, man, Lil Zane will crush doggone, Too Short or whatever. Like just something outrageous, and you can test like to see how emotionally invested people are in, something that they call theirs. But we're going to move ahead to part 2 when I return. I hope y'all have a good day. Thank you.